So probably best for Ann as the only other non-chair.
Okay. So I'll call this meeting of the JMRL Board Policy Committee to order. And we're going to start with a motion for remote participation of one of our trustees.
Ann, do you mind reading it?
I move that Martha Ledford's request to attend today's meeting of the JMRL Board remotely due to temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents her physical attendance.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. Well, welcome, Martha.
Well, thank you.
Okay. So we are starting today, continuing our discussion of policy 4234, safe child. And our goal for today is kind of distill some bullet points that will sort of guide a draft that we'll get together by hook or crook between now and the next meeting, so that we'll have language at the next meeting to actually finalize. I saw that and David kind of asked for, or maybe you organized some opportunities to do some prep work in terms of peer or comparable policies, and we have some of those. So I appreciate everyone that did that homework. And then I think there's some bullets in the original document as well. The one piece of context I'll mention, and then I'll kind of just open up the floor maybe. Again, this is it's my understanding that this is one of the policies that is not just on the shelf, but it gets kind of used day-to-day operational as we're handing. It interfaces with how do people use the library, so we have staff kind of relying on this as a tool to communicate with the public, and I think you actually, what I heard is you can't hand this physical copy. So in my mind, we could hand this copy to someone, or we could hand a distilled version of that, where it's sort of a friendlier, bullet pointed, and then with a reference back to this policy, one or the other. But that's something to keep in mind. This is sitting closer to something that the public uses and relies on than maybe some of the other policies we have. Okay, how should we proceed from here?
I think we had some folks that had some thoughts and added some content. So anyone want to speak to? I think Camille did a little work here. You want to speak to what you found in the last couple months? What your thoughts are?
One thing that came up, and I also asked our children's librarian for her input too, and this was the same thing she said, was adding language about parents remaining in the building during library programs for children 9 and younger, because I think there's a little bit of a lack of clarity on that for the public and maybe even for the staff. I saw some interesting formatting on some of the other ones I looked at that had sort of a chart like, if your kid is 9 and under, this is what they can do or who needs to be with them. If they're this age, then it's this, which for handing out might be something interesting, but also would be more work to do formatting on. And then the other feedback I got from the children's librarian was maybe more clarification in there on what adequately supervised means. If different people interpret that differently as well.
Yeah, I noticed that in several of the comparables is they had essentially something similar to this.
Yeah.
Chart.
Well, not the chart, but the definition where your cursor is right now of what the supervised means. That was in a couple of them. It was real similar language, similar phrase.
Yeah, we say within conversation with just.
Go ahead, Martha.
I really liked the Arlington one with the chart in it. I thought that was it made it really readable for an individual looking at it. One thing I also liked about that was a definition of what the time period is. Maybe left alone for no longer than a half an hour or something like that. I don't know whether or not staff would find that important in there. But I thought that was quite good. I did have a question about the age groupings and how that age grouping would go along with a policy that we looked at earlier, where we're looking at the age of maturity for kids when parents no longer have a right to knowing what they're checking out. I think that was what it was. Um, and was thinking that maybe some of our language here should parallel language that we have regarding age and rights of patrons in the library.
Yeah, I remember that, and it's 18. We basically changed it was a circulation policy of some sort. I can't remember specifically which one, Martha. Library card eligibility, maybe.
Mhm.
And it was to match state law, which under state law, parents and guardians have access to information about juvenile accounts if the child is under the age of 18. So in my mind, it's a slightly different thing about you can come into the building and use the space versus what you can and can't check out. But I do agree that parents would be looking for like one-stop shopping for information about the library, not like, oh, this is in this policy, this is in that policy. So maybe even referring back to the other one in a way that's useful, like for questions about that type of thing.
Or maybe making it that the 18 years and older may supervise children of any age. So adulthood, essentially. Because I don't have up on my computer right now what age we have for supervising.
It's 12.
Yeah.
Specify what age of child they're supervising. There's a big difference between a 12-year-old with an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old
with a baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
In talking about this with our managers and other children's staff, I didn't get a sense that there was a real need or a will to change those ages. It doesn't mean that we can't, that the board shouldn't consider that, but there wasn't a big push to say like 12 is too young or 12 is too old. Everybody seemed to be pretty happy with the numbers that are there. It's just kind of the format and how we describe that.
You mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, and frequently we don't even know how old the children are until something comes up. It's the end of the day and they haven't been picked up, or there's a behavior issue, and we say, hey, where's your mom? Or where's your adult that's with you? And then we find out, oh, there is no adult. We don't, and then we say, well, how old are you? Because you can't always tell by looking at the kid.
Mhm.
Well, I do think, I agree with you that if this is a policy that we can do that, I would assume it does need to be graphically formatted. And it can be easily formatted. It's a little small print, but it's better.
There was another formatting example from that list that I like. I don't know if they just had little headers, it's all you know, instead of probably thought, or no.
Might be Prince William, which did in bold and then bullets underneath each one of those bold headers.
That wasn't, yeah, I should have like.
This is like a more general code of conduct.
Yeah, they have it.
Yeah, well, they just have unattended children there.
Yeah, the Norfolk one is interesting because they have like a piece of their behavior policy, a piece of their circulation policy, a piece of their child policy, all in one, so like the one-stop shop for a parent trying to figure out how they're.
Yeah, I mean, that one's much, children's policies are all under one umbrella.
This one kind of struck me as like we have an employee handbook that refers back to different second policy. This struck me as sort of a patron handbook where they were not giving you the whole, every word, legalistic word in the policy, but kind of excerpting things for you.
More like an FAQ type.
Mhm.
And I also agree that we should add that the parent has to be in the building.
The one I'm thinking of, David, must be the one in the other folder, by process of elimination.
Montgomery
Yeah.
Floyd.
Yeah, just there, that's. Just adding those headers to, hey, this is what this paragraph is about to talk about. Made a big difference for me. That you don't have to read a couple sentences to figure out what this topic is. So that was a simple change, but I do like the chart as well, to the extent that we have four different ages and they mean different things. That's useful to put them on the spot.
So I think some of this comes down to last policy committee meeting, we talked about tone a lot. So you want to make sure that it's accessible to parents and that it's friendly. It's not saying we don't want your kids in the library. It's saying like, here's how we're going to keep them safe and you can help us do that. We also talked last time about some of these things being more procedural. And we had a conversation about whether or not this is important information, kind of like what the staff is bound by. And I think Camille said, well, I would like to know that as a parent as well. Like here are the things that the staff is going to make sure that they're not alone with your child or that the child's not in a room.
Now you could potentially simplify this into some principle. In some of the specifics.
Into a procedure.
Yeah, I don't know where that line would draw. But it is a lot of text.
It is. So I think we're talking about scope, basically, like what do we want to broaden the scope here to include more useful information to parents? And if so, what would that be? And is this the appropriate place for it? Or are we just, because I think to Martha, that was a joke, but it's a little bit true. Like if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know, it has worked for a long time. So when we first cracked this open, I think Mike, I made the comment like, oh yeah, it's a good policy. You know, it doesn't need a lot, but it could certainly be improved.
I mean, what comes up, you know, I have no idea what would come up. Whether we need to expand this or not. But they would know.
Well, I think that's what these red bullets have come from, staff are bringing up topics, so.
And this one comes up a lot because there's
Yeah.
confusion about how to handle this.
So how do we staff?
Well, largely it comes up in teen areas and only this branch has a separate, you know, closed off by doors teen area. So most of them are kind of in a larger open floor plan there. And so generally it's deal with the behaviors. If there's some sort of behavior happening with an adult sitting in a space that's intended for children and families, then address it via the conduct policy. If there are times in which we are anticipating use by children or by teens, and we think that the presence of adults there is going to interfere with their access, then we would ask people, you know, hey, can we move you over here? The kids are getting out of school now. There's a bunch of teenagers coming, and like just having an adult in there working sometimes is enough to push them away. If we had separate spaces, then I think we would be more inclined to say, you know, this space is only for, you cannot be here unless you're, you know, accessing the collection or you're with a you know, a child or a teen or whatnot.
But I guess my underlying question is just fundamentally, do we want to? There's we're trying to include and make the space that's comfortable for the subgroup, but
Right.
it's also an exclusionary element.
Yeah, you don't
of
want
that.
to restrict
We're telling
access.
Someone you
Yeah.
can't do this, or you should. So I'm thinking of Central. I think there's some signage that says, "Please consider." It's more of an
Right.
ask,
Yeah.
than a rule, and so that's kind of where I'm opening up right now. Is do we want to stick with that? Which approach is, you know, do we want?
I think we would need some legal advice, and we would need some to really see the landscape if we were going to restrict access to an area based on age.
Right.
You know, because then we're, to your point, I think we're opening up other potential issues.
Aside from legal, is that if we agree among our, in the committee, do we not even want to do that, then,
Does it work? Typically to ask an adult to.
Not without some hurt feelings from time to time. Like there are people that, like, that's where sometimes friendlier and more comfortable seating or spaces might be, more colorful, more bright. You know, so yeah, we've had plenty of people who have said, oh, sure, can let me move, and plenty of people who've not been happy about being asked to leave an area, even with signage. Yeah.
Does that fall underneath, or does it dovetail with the idea of programs? That space in the afternoon is maybe a teen program, sort of open-ended teen program. I think in something that I was reading, we were talking about, what are the requirements of supervision during programs, and whether or not it's a school program and the teachers are responsible, or it's a toddler read aloud program and a parent is supposed to be with them, but also programs that are only for those people who are participating in the program. And would something like that be applicable to designating a space?
Potentially. I mean, I think of programs as being staff led or staff at least supervised of some sort, whereas use of the space may or may not be. There should be
True.
staff there. If you think about the central library, there is a desk that is not
Mm.
usually staffed near the young adult area. But most days it's open space. So I think it would be a stretch to call that use of that space a program, unless we were doing something like it's homework help, or it's study time, or it's Minecraft, or whatever it would be.
if we were, do we or do we not have age restricted programs? I think we may not. We do.
I believe we do.
So
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
20 years old,
You can't come to story
you
time.
can do story time.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do that for the story times themselves. We have specific targeted where we've had to tell people. We've had to tell people, like, I'm sorry, your child is too young or too old. This is targeted for a different age.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, well, it comes back to what outcome do we want here? I guess the outcome is clear, is what I'm hearing, is we want an outcome where we do have these opportunities for age focused spaces and times.
I think that's a key distinction. It's not all the time. It's just during, certain periods or hours.
So I guess the question would be, so I don't think this black text, Safe Child, says anything about this now.
No.
So in the instances where if I'm a patron, and you're telling me to say, we'd like you to, cede the space for someone else, and I'm gonna be one of the hurt feeling folks, I might start to say, well, where is that written down? Who says who? And so have you needed, or would you need a tool where there's where it is written?
I think it would have been useful at times. We didn't have it, but even if the tool is an ask,
Right.
Even if that's the case, then that seems like a good landing place to me, where it says in the event of, or staff may ask. Yeah.
Yeah, it's happened in the teen area. In the children's area, it happens more where there might be an adult hanging out in the children's room, because that's where the couch is.
Yeah.
And
But-
that's kind of gone back and forth too.
Yeah.
I mean, for a while, we were asking adults who were by themselves and not, like, I mean, it's a while ago. And then, not doing that. So I think consistency wise, having some kind of guidance is probably.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we do want to, at least from a draft, it's draft. Try and put a sentence together that's more of an ask months.
I also think using the collection is an important one too, because we don't want to say, if we have teachers coming in that need to, or homeschool families where it's just a parent, we don't want to be policing people, like, what are you doing in this space or time? So if and we do want, what Krista and I always tell staff is address the behavior,
Yes.
yeah.
So if someone's sleeping on the couch in the children's.
Right. If someone is sitting and reading a children's book, then that's fine, unless that couch is needed for this story time or something,
Or their behaviors disruptive.
Right. And I did see something in one of these other ones about leaving kids when they were in,
It's actually written twice.
it's in, that's how strongly Camille feels about it. I mean, that might, would that, something along that lines? It's tiny, but it said parents must remain in the building at all times. I mean, that would only be for assuming that 12 is the age that we leave, it would only be for kids younger. Yes. Yeah. So 12, under 12, right? Yeah.
Under 12 or under? They can be by themselves when they're 10.
Right.
But even by themselves. You still want the parent in the building. That's not.
We don't say
No,
that.
yeah,
We
we
say
would
that
let
you
a
can have
10-year-old
10.
in the library alone.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So this would be, that would
What age group should parents be in?
9 and under. But I think you're right that chart or something would be helpful there.
And even if they're at a library program upstairs, parents should still be in the
In
building.
the building, right, so it can happen.
Right. That's the big concern, right? Or that the program is over and no one is there to pick the kid up.
Or the program gets canceled or whatever, there's things.
Right. Things happen. So this is in there twice. So we're looking at formatting, we're looking at tone, the issues that we've discussed that are not addressed in the current policy are the kind of seating in the children's teen area. Parents being or in the building when younger kids are in programs, and then what does adequately supervise mean? And somebody saw some language they liked about that. What was that? Was that Arlington's as well? Visual contact.
I think that was.
Supervise means the parent or caregiver is always in the immediate vicinity of and in visual contact with the child. We say conversational or visual.
Isn't that the same thing?
It's a sight and conversational distance. Yeah, we say that. We say
Yeah.
immediate vicinity. So we do define it.
People's versions of conversational distance
Yeah.
and vary. Can you hear me if I'm screaming? Well, we run into that at Central with the big hole in the floor where somebody can potentially be on the second floor and there's a child on the bottom floor and they're within conversational. I mean, how many times does somebody come and yell at somebody who's down there to say, hey, adult to adult conversations, yeah. I think the things that we want to preserve are some language about, or what our goals are with the policy. Library does not act in loco parentis. Like, does that need further definition? Staff know what we think it means, which is that, like, ultimately we're not.
That's an antiquated legal.
So just using some like human language about that, right?
I was thinking of the opposite way, which is we might want that as from a legal standpoint.
Or at least to define it. I mean, I think it's fine to leave it and then define, as long as people know what we're talking about. Right. I think the goal there was probably to make a distinction for parents between schools where the school is, responsible for this, legally responsible. But then to your point a couple months ago, like, what are those limits? We're not sure. Those might be better defined than they were when this was written in 2013.
And the other thing I would look at is this whole second to last paragraph about the open door and two-person. I think it's, all of that is good practice. And I do agree with the idea that I think parents would want to know generally that those are practices. But I also have a feeling that it could be more concise for the purposes of this policy.
And I know you love procedures so much, but, you know, if we were to make that more concise and we were to have a procedure and even did it like
Yeah.
a meeting room where each branch, you know.
Yeah, they
because
can
our
have their
facilities are
own.
different. If someone is left, then they're under the page, you're dating, like this long, when you do that. You know, that might be.
Camille's giving me a hard time because I have been threatening the managers to have a procedure working group similar to our employee handbook. Because some of our procedures have not kept up with the changes in policy, or they're just, things have changed. So they really need a holistic, like top to bottom review. We have taken things that are procedural out of policy, and then we just need to make sure we keep up with the details after that. So that's just one step closer to conscripting you for that task. So
Well,
I'm
that's
fine
actually
with it.
someone who's familiar with all the policies in general.
Yes.
And the employee handbook.
Yes. Exactly.
Can you do me a favor and just put what this topic is pointing, as we're pointing to, so two door policy. Two person.
Yeah, and I know we went through and added glass to all of our meeting rooms except for at one location where it's an exterior meeting room. It still needs to be done, but
Okay.
But just out of curiosity, what if there's like a big snow event and everything shuts down, thinking about it, and some, 10-year-old kid
It's
like
left.
there, and the
Yeah.
owner can't get there, then it is possible you do that.
we would contact the police.
30 minutes and then
Oh,
30 minutes to staff, not just one staff
Yeah, that's
person.
the other thing,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have one person.
So that is something that maybe we would want to clarify as well here.
If it's a snow situation, the last thing they're gonna wanna be doing is going to the library to take some kid home, but, we're not taking the kid home. Say the parents are stuck somewhere.
okay. So that's why it says, you are the one, like, there's nobody else.
Yeah. Because the other thing is that, like, at the central branch, there are people that live nearby within walking distance, where at the end of the day at 9 o'clock, a child could exit the building and to be walking home. And if that were to happen here, staff would be very concerned because there are places nearby, or if it were to happening in Louisa, for example, where there's no real housing anywhere nearby, staff would be concerned for the safety of that child and might contact the authorities. But at Central, if the child was
Of age.
of age, 12 years old, and we would maybe check with them, hey, do you have,
I
where
know
you're
the other
going?
Friday night, the child that was there was technically old enough that they didn't wanna leave the child out on the
Yeah.
porch.
So staff made a judgment call, and they erred on the side,
Sure.
of making sure the
Yes.
child was safe.
Yeah.
And also it was clear from talking to the child that they're waiting to be picked up.
Yeah.
So it's a different scenario, right? Which happens,
Yes.
Now, one of the policies I was reading, another library, they said exactly who the appropriate authorities are. Do we want to say that we will be contacting the police, or, so then people understand that, so they know where they would look for their child should that child have been picked up?
I think that the only option is to call. Generally, we would call the non-emergency number as long as staff can, unless it was a scenario like Ann's describing where there is an actual emergency, there was an earthquake or something like that. It is the police. There's no other option to call. We would just say call the non-emergency police department number for the jurisdiction, because it would vary jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I don't know of how many scenarios there are where the police are gonna take the child away from the scene. You know, if the child gets left at the library, my experience has been the police will come, they will then wait there. But I don't know what their procedures are. I don't know. They might have a clock where it's like they need to take the child someplace.
Mm-hmm.
We also deal with the truancy issue here because we used to contact the schools to find out.
If it was during a school
If it
day.
was during school hours and we suspected the child was truant, we wouldn't necessarily contact the parent. We would check at the schools, at least downtown.
What is that language? Suspected to be truant.
Yeah, suspected to be truant. And we added that at that time because we had some kids hanging out in the library during the day. Which is not the worst place for them to be, but if they're.
Yeah, pretty good.
School, you know, but they'd be on the computers at the library instead of at school where they were supposed to be.
So that's an example where appropriate authorities is covering two
Is not the
different,
parent.
Mhm.
well, it's covering.
Mhm.
The parent
school
takes the
or-
kids at school and then, yeah.
I guess, Martha, I would lean on the police are going to be doing everything that they can in order to locate and contact those parents. If there's a
Mhm.
scenario in which they have kids. And usually, like, I can't think of a scenario where it's been longer than an hour, maybe 30 minutes to 60 minutes. Because it's usually what Krista described is someone got their days mixed up. You know, we close it at 5 on Saturday. They think it's 9, you know, something like that. And usually the kid can get in touch with the parent too,
I was gonna say, it seems since 2013, like percentage of kids that.
have their own.
Yeah, so, yeah, the case
Yeah.
the other week, the mother's phone had lost charge and she had no service. And so the kid couldn't get a hold of the mother because. the phone
Kid had
was
a
dead.
phone, but.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And we will let them use our phones in that instance. That's one of the few instances
Yeah.
where we let them use our phones is to contact their parents, you know.
In situations like this, do we have 2 staff members that stay with the child until an authority or parent come forward? And I mean, that's after hours for staff. How is staff compensated for those additional hours?
Yeah, they would have to get comp time. Their manager would have to give them time off at another point.
Leave early on another day.
But I think that it's implied here because we also say that you have to observe a 2-person rule with kids.
Yeah. Mhm.
But maybe we could make that direct correlation to staff. You know, that's a burden though. If you're at a branch where there's only 2 staff members there, then,
Mhm.
you know, they're staying and then they also need to get an hour off at some point during open hours. But it is what it is. I don't, library staff are not interested in, they might complain and not love it, but they're not gonna leave a child on the steps of the library or inside the library. So this kind of sounds like a rewrite.
I think it's a rewrite, but I think we have a good feel for the scope and, yeah, and
It's like a total.
it's like a ton of,
Reformat.
yeah, reformat and tone, the scope is pretty good. I feel comfortable with what we got in terms of the scope at this point. If everyone else.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, then we can move on. If there's nothing, no other comments here.
I just make one, this is the technical. In some jurisdictions, the sheriff's department does things that in our community. I would just make, there may be, you may have to say police.
Yeah, that's when that appropriate authorities is pretty, excuse me. It would probably be the sheriff's department that would send somebody. That's also who you'll get if you call 911.
You need to say, police has a, you know.
I mean, what's
Why we say.
appropriate authorities, right? Or just the,
for law
the
enforcement.
ECC, the emergency contact, what is the phrase I'm thinking of? You're calling emergency services, basically. EMS, well, that's medical, yeah, and we're not calling medical unless it's a medical scenario. If you call 911, yeah, or just appropriate authorities, that might include that. Yeah. Well, when we call 911 in the city of Charlottesville, frequently the first responders might be the fire department, especially if there's a medical issue. Well, just because they're the first ones to be on the scene. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll work on the wording there. And also, like, we're not trying to, maybe when this was written, there was some little bit of like, hey, parents, if you don't pick your kids up, we're going to call the police on you. Yeah. And we're not trying to punish the parents. We wanted to make them aware of what the closing hours are and make sure that they're not doing it again. But I don't
And
think
that their kid is and that their kid is going to be safe in case there's a
Yes.
problem. I mean, their car
Yeah.
breaks down, they can't make it. Their kid is safe.
But to your point, we're not calling them to say this person broke the law. We're calling them to say, hey, we need help, making sure this kid is safe. So, okay, great. Okay, Mike, you want to put a pin on that, and then maybe we can give it a pass.
Yeah.
I don't hear anybody else volunteering.
Yeah, well,
Camille went like,
someone wants to kind of work with David on this, contact him and copy me, and if we get to be 3 weeks out and that hasn't happened.
I can help you, but after the meeting.
after the new year. This won't, trust me, this
We have a longer.
2 months. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
I think we have 2 months plus, just
Plus next week.
plus an extra week, just because today is early.
Also, it's if people run across other good examples of policies or find ones that you like, then you can continue. I'll keep looking at those places. So if you find something else, throw it in there. And we can try to maybe tweak some language there. Okay.
Okay, so our other goal for today is just to at least introduce policy 453, library and community partnerships, which has a typo actually, in partnership.
Oh, yeah.
I know there was a typo in one of those, similar one in one of these other policies. Anyways, so this one, in my mind, is parallel to the old program policy, where we said, it basically originally, before a rewrite a couple years ago, said, JMRL produces quality programs for patrons of all ages. That was like the whole statement. And I think this is kind of similar in terms of, I think there's some things that could be probably fleshed out here in terms of what are the purposes of partnerships, which I think we talked about a little bit. What is the scope of what a partnership mean? How does someone get to be a partner? That has been a question in my mind for some time. Is I'll see, oh, we're partnering with so-and-so, and for a while it seemed like there were some what I'll call usual suspects, as we kind of partnering with these same folks over and over again. And was that because, who identified that as a useful kind of series? Was it just because that's who staff kind of knew about? Was it because this organization had approached the library? And if someone else was interested in getting involved, it's not clear from this how someone would do it. So those are all kind of issues in the back that have been in the back of my mind for some time. There's just not a lot of definition, and from that, specifically from that standpoint of why is organization X included in this sort of category and organization Y is not. So that's and I'll also say there's a context here, which again, just from a member of the public who's reading the sign that says, hey, we're in partner, or the press release that we're partnering with X. There is, in my mind, an implication, or there can be an implication of endorsement of we're endorsing this, we're working with this group, they're our partner. They've now been placed on a level where we're including them in our press release, and we're co-branding on some level. with that organization. So, and I think there's good reasons to do all those things, and we do that productively. But I would, for a couple of years, Dave and I have talked about, well, I would like there to be a little more context presented for just for kind of public consumption about why, how that's happening and why, and what's the benefit to, how does that serve our mission about this when we're doing that?
Is there any flushing out of that last sentence, coordination of community requests?
Yeah.
I mean, are there standards for?
Yeah, we have a request form that needs to be filled out by groups that want to partner with the library, and then that goes to, depending on the age group, it goes to the coordinators of those services basically, and then they'll make a determination on whether or not it's possible. Sometimes the partnership requests are like, oh, well, I have a library on the moon, I'd like to do this program, and it's not possible. But if it is possible, then they'll work with the branch or department that they would be most likely partnering with to determine whether or not it's
Consistent with that.
yeah, consistent with our mission and values. And then also, like, a lot of it is logistically possible. Like, what can we do? Like, I think about some of the longstanding partners, not to pick on Camille, but like two came to mind right away. It's like the Botanical Garden of the Piedmont is a strong partner for Gordon Avenue, and they have done co-branding of story times and events at the garden. And some of that was kind of a COVID thing, right? It was like looking for outdoor spaces in order to do these things. And then the other one is the former Bailey Museum, now the Fralin, where they have a highly successful partnership with Storytime at the museum there. So it's a way to expand the boundaries of library services. But like, each of those probably started with somebody contacting a staff member saying, hey, we're interested in doing this thing, or a staff member saying, we need an outside space, where could we go, and contacting them, and then funneling them towards here's how you request these things.
And it's much better than it used to be, in that now that we have the form, it splits them all into a spreadsheet like we talked about. The most recent ones I'm thinking of are the Front Porch, Blue Ridge Irish Music School, different groups that say, hey, we want to do a program with the library at Gordon Avenue and North Side, but not Central or whatever. And then we look at that spreadsheet and figure out, well, do they want money? How much money? Where do they want to go? What is like you said, logistical? Do we have the space for the type of thing they're talking about?
Yeah.
Is it fit our?
So I think that the concept of providing some.
That's what I was going to say.
They fill out the program partnership form.
Yeah, they're partnering on a program.
Wants to do a library program, direct them to that form.
I mean, that's probably.
And then a partnership to me would be a long-term, fusing of two organizations, and a program is.
I mean, the money thing to me also is weird, like, that, like, an organization would come to us and say, we want to do this program at $300. Well, to me, that's like, you're hiring
A solicitation, right? Yeah.
Direct them to that so that we have them all captured.
Right, yeah,
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah,
all of
like
that
the Seagull
should be-
Jazz Society is another example. Pre-COVID, we used to partner with them every year for Jazz Month to do a film or a musical program. And I saw that Brittany's working with them, maybe potentially on a porch program as part of poetry.
I mean, largely what we're talking about is programs,
It's called the program partnership for,
Right.
not the like general library partnership.
because the other partners that we would identify as like our long-term partners, and maybe it's worth listing here, would be like the book festival, the Friends of the Library, our 5 jurisdictional partners. I will always refer to them as our partners, and then potentially the school systems of each of our 5 jurisdictions. But like, so Susan has been working on a program in Nelson that's a partnership with the schools that's working on trying to get automatic library cards for kids and things like that. Like, that would also have to fit in the parameters here. Those are our long-term partners, but we don't have a ton of those.
You don't want to.
No, think about like the Discovery Museum, right? They're our partner because they provide those passes that we check out and circulate for families to get a week access there. So that's a long-term partnership where we
Well, a lot of those, when you did when you showed us all
the
things
kits,
checked out,
yeah.
A lot of those were other organizations that were.
Yeah. I think it's mostly programs.
Yeah. The
And
Bird Group now wants to do more backpacks
Yeah.
for birdie
Yeah.
kids, and fill out the form. you
There's
know,
a
and it has
there's
the
a
sign.
chess club that wants to, we want to do something to recognize the 4-H club, we want to, it might be a display, it might be a program, it might be some sort of thing, it might be handing out information, like they want to be able to, if you get these books on animal husbandry, then you also would get this additional information, those types of things.
Can you pop
So
up-
would we be talking, the title of this being library/community partnerships/programs? And would we want to put some sort of communication in here that you would fill out such and such a form, or Michael was talking about a greater definition of how these occur? So some statement of this is how you can become a partner program provider.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the goals, right? To Mike always talks about, so we want the broad level, here's the board's wish for the library, here's what we want the library to be, but then there's also the public has to see this. So how do we give direction and definition to the public on how to engage with the library? So I've always seen that as one of the outcomes here, is that we want some sort, even if it's just go to this, there's a form
A
here,
link.
or go to this
Yeah.
page.
Hey, so it's got to be a partner. Yeah.
Yeah.
To that end, it's easy to pop open, program policy. Because I'm just wondering if what level of overlap we have in,
Not under PR, apparently.
library program for those.
All right, doing great.
The answer is no, it's not easy.
Library programs. Excuse me.
Okay, you're right there, right, but on the reading cursor just was. Okay, individuals or organizations may request consideration to partner with library staff using the program by completing a program partnership request form.
Right, so
And-
there is a little-
Yeah, that's a good point.
And again, this is a program specific policy. So we do have this distinction, potential distinction of there's you're partnering for, and this is the same as the short term, long term that we're talking about. We're already covered at in terms of there's a concept of partnership, although we're still not being clear what that means. But that's how you, at least on the program level, we are communicating. Here's what we do.
The program partnerships are distinct and
Are they not?
I mean, does the book festival, what do they do for the library? I mean, what's that partnership? It's changing.
Well, they
I mean, they use the library.
yeah, they get kind of preferred access to the rooms, like so Krista would have booked out the rooms at the central branch well in advance of when we would let a member of the public book them out. We're currently partnering with them on the Same Page program, which is a very specific thing where they're going to bring an author in, and JMRL is going to buy specific copies of the book to be available for the public, and then we're going to do programming around that.
So that's a big deal.
Yes. So I feel like this is a good point. So this is the programming partnership is kind of got a definition somewhere. We talked very recently during signage, which the board's going to talk about today, about that concept, whether or not to include that concept of partners in signage, specifically to Mike's point about kind of co-branding things. And then the other place that I think it would come up would be on like displays, handouts, kind of on a similar, here are things that the library is putting out that might include, like, here's this program, in this case it's a program, but here's the at the botanical garden, and we might have their logo and things like that. So in my mind, those are the three big things, just kind of programming together, including their information on signage and branding. And I've already lost the third one. I think maybe signage and branding were two different things.
Okay, so my goal for today was just to kind of get this started and get to thinking about it and then wake up in the middle of the night and it's in the back of your mind.
Do we need to, I mean, if we have a program partnership already, that's already clarified.
Yeah,
But this policy is separate.
Yeah, it's its
We
own
need to
thing.
define, distinguish this from program,
or get rid of it.
or get rid of.
Possibly.
Yeah, I don't know what the background, like most of these older policy, which this probably this is a 10-year review, right? And it probably adopted in 96, right? It probably hasn't substantially changed since that time. And sometimes when you scratch a little bit, you find that this is in response to something. Something happened and the library board at the time said, or they wanted to do something, and this was in response to that. So the language of it, kind of the services, products, or monetary donations, it's odd to me. Like what were the goals here originally?
Selective relation.
It has something to do with grants and avoiding the.
Maybe, but there's a separate grants policy though.
Right. I don't know.
Maybe it might have been grants, like it thought about grant writing as being partnership. If we get a grant from the Community Foundation of the Blue Ridge, is that a partnership or is that I mean, pretty clearly now that's under the grants policy, not this. But.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, when we do the food drive. The food drives.
Food drive is a good one. We
Here
do that
are,
annually. Yeah.
Something on behalf of,
And we have their logo all over. it.
yes.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a step we could take is just, the collective knowledge of, here's examples in practice of what we've done and called it a partnership. And then we can see if there's a pattern that emerges where we can find kind of a principle. Because this seems to be, again, it's a long-standing phrase and term and concept that's been employed for a long
And
time.
I would say that's more, we're collaborating.
Collaboration.
Partnership is something.
Okay, so maybe write down for now, collaboration versus partnership. So my goal for the next meeting was this.
I mean, partnerships, is legal binding, term. It has a
Yeah.
lot of implications.
So I think if you use it in that sense,
Calling yourself, well, yeah, I'm partnering with, festival is open and suddenly you're stuck with it, debt. Which you would.
I don't want that.
We certainly use. We've certainly used the term for a long time.
Yeah, it is a legal term, though, we don't really think about it.
Because I think in that sense, our only partners are the 5 jurisdictions, our jurisdictional partners that legally form JMRL. So maybe just pulling at a thread, maybe what you're thinking about, Ann, is changing this to call it community collaborations or something like that.
That's a nice.
Yeah.
positive.
But we've got partnership everywhere else. We just looked at another policy that says partnership, but it was pretty well defined. For the scope of it was just for this program or.
And certainly that word is used. In non-legal, legally binding ways. I think
Yeah.
you have to be careful. If you don't need to use it for collaboration or whatever the word is a little looser, maybe not found.
So maybe these two ideas are together.
Okay, but I'd be interested in, I know you're listing these 3 just as a starting point. And just seeing more examples of what are we actually doing now, even to the extent of might be nice to see some of these flyers or press releases or links that we can kind of see. Not just saying, well, we work with the Fralin Museum, but for me to be able to view, well, in what's the context of how we're presenting that the activity, wherever, however, whatever it is. And again, my goal is just to make this more clear for staff and the public. What do these things mean? And clearly there's a useful activity going on where we're working in some way with people from the community because it helps us present our services, so. It's something we want to do, this is more of a communication and definition, exercise in looking at. But my goal for today was just get the wheels turning. But started a little bit, yeah.
They're turning.
If we have time, so next meeting, we'll have to look at, language for safe child. And then depending on how much, and the goal would be to kind of finalize that language. Depending on how much time we have left over, then we would, in terms of partnerships, look at, some of these examples we've come up with, and the next step would be try and distill those down into bullet points. Yeah, I think we've kind of settled on this pattern of intro, bullet points, and then text, copy. I think that's been working pretty good.
Me too.
So we're just starting that sequence. We may or may not. I guess I'm pointing out next month, depending on how much time we spend finalizing safe child, we'll control how much time we have to kind of make progress on this one. Again, I want to get the wheels turning further. All right, any other things on partnerships or any other topic for this meeting? All right, we will then conclude our meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you all.